Next up, we're fortunate to have Jim Johnson from the USA, actually from West Virginia. Jim worked in the Virginian Cattlemen's Association and marketed over 1 million head of feeder cattle. He joined Bovagen, which later on he came into Zoetis in the DNA business. Jim's a cattle genetics specialist and in more recent time has a deep understanding of how genomics work in the real world. In the US, especially in Angus, I think they're genotyping tens of thousands, if not maybe 100,000 cattle this year. So it's our privilege to have Jim and host him in New Zealand for a week or two. Jim, cheers.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. The hospitality has just been fantastic so far. I just unparalleled any place else I've been at this point, and I appreciate that. I was talking earlier. It's going to be hard. I'm a kind of an animated speaker, so it's really going to be hard for me to stay behind the podium. So if I get away, somebody give me the high sign and circle me back in. So I've worked in this DNA business for about 12 years now. Seen quite an evolution in the process, and I will tell you that most of my friends, I'm not a scientist, so let's get that straight to start with, right? I'm a cattle person just like you. Most of my friends, they ask me, they say, what do you do? And I say, well, I try to take this complicated technology and explain it in a way that us ranchers can understand it. And they said, oh, you're an interpreter. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much what we do, right? So I'm gonna kind of give you a little bit of an analogy now of what we sort of what I do in a presentation at home, and so this is the audience participation portion of this presentation, right? So you guys have to participate here. So I'm going to ask Guy I need a volunteer from the audience. So Guy, come on up here. I need a volunteer to kind of help me out with this demonstration. All right. So Guy, I assume we have some golfers in here. Guy and I are going to play a round of golf against each other, all right? He gets to pick 3 more people for his foursome, and then I get to pick 3 more people for my foursome, okay? So Guy, look out among the crowd here and pick out your 3 golfers, what you might select to be 3 people on your team.
Well, that's not hard, Jim. I'd take the 3 boys from BLG. I'd take Chris Kelly, Graham Lauder, and Max Zoetis.
You think they have more time to play golf? Is that what you're saying? That's good. That's good. So that's a little bit of an analysis. So now it's my turn, okay? So I'm going to ask, how many people in here play golf? You got to raise your hand. All right, so I see a few people. Oh, come on, there's more people who play golf in here than that. All right, how many people kind of have a handicap under 20? You know? All right, well, I'm going to take these 3 people over here that play golf, all right? They're going to be on my team. All right, so now what's the average sell price, or what do you guys usually sell a bull or purchase a bull for? I don't know, $6,000, $7,000, something like that maybe? That's your bet. Now, how many people are going to take that $6,000 or $7,000 and bet on Guy's team? 1, okay. All right, how many people are going to take that $6,000 or $7,000 and bet on my team? I got a few more people. And I tell people, but we go out in the pasture and select cattle that way all the time. We go out and we say, that looks like she'll make a nice cow. That looks like he'll make a nice bull. But if I go out and select on data, I'm probably going to win, right? And so that's kind of the analogy I give in the U.S. It helps to have information when you're selecting cattle, doesn't it? So I'm going to move right along here. I'll give you a little background of where I am in the United States for those of you that have or haven't visited there. A little about myself. I live in a town called Appomattox, Virginia. Virginia's kind of on the East Coast if we look at it in the United States. Very close to Washington, D.C., but we're still, where I live in Washington, D.C. would be in the northern part of the country or the state there, but about 3.5 hours from Washington, D.C., south. Very historic place in Appomattox. That's where the surrender of our Civil War happened in 1865. So we just had the celebration last year of 150 years ago. We had the surrender of our Civil War. That's my house. It's very similar to parts of New Zealand. I think we got a lot of grass. You can see that we do a fairly decent job of growing green grass. That's my wife and daughter celebrating 4th of July. And then we also have some snow. So we get some snow in the wintertime as well. When I said I'm kind of like you all, I have cattle. We have Charolais cattle. And we have some Hereford cattle. So we do a little bit of both. We have a bull right now called Forefront at GenX. We have another bull called Sovereign at ABS. And we have a Hereford bull at ABS called Fortune. So again, just kind of giving you guys a little background of myself. This is my team in the U.S. We have 4 dedicated salespeople, 1 part-time salesperson, marketing, tech services, etc. This is kind of their territories. They have very large territories. I know that the Zoetis genetics folks here have large territories as well, but it kind of gives you an example. Nancy on the far left, we're all in the cattle business. She has shorthorn cattle. Larry beside her has red Angus. Then Dan and Rod, kind of on the other side of me, are in the Angus business. Kevin lives in Oklahoma, has commercial Brangus cattle. And then Kent Anderson, our tech service people, who some of you have heard from before, he's got Simmental or Sim Angus cattle. So we're all involved in the cattle business in the U.S. So how are genomics doing in the U.S.? So I'll give you a little background. For us, 49% of registrations in the U.S. are Angus cattle. Why are we focused so hard on Angus? That's why. All right? But a little more information, 50% of the Simmental registrations are Angus influenced. 50% of the Gelfie registrations are Angus influenced or half-bloods, balancers. 50% of the Limousin registrations are roughly Angus or Angus influenced. Red Angus would be about 10%. And of course, Brangus, you have about a third of those would have Angus influence. So it's a pretty big part of our market. This is how we're doing from a genomic standpoint. This is the adoption we've had. 2016, we're hoping to eclipse 100,000 50K tests with Angus. SHARL showed you this slide the other day. This is the percent of registrations right now that we did in 2015, and we hope to continue to accelerate that. So I've visited some farmers here, and we've talked about genomics, and what we've discovered in the U.S., the keys to a successful implementation of a genomics program, and it's very important. Number 1, selection. I mean, we know that. As breeders, we know that genomics are important through selection, right? And then basically, what I tell people is, how fast can I make genetic progress? How fast, as a breeder, can I make genetic progress? And then how much faster can I run from my competition? Now, your competition might be fellow Angus breeders. It might be other breeds. How much faster can I run? Marketing is very, very important. If you're actually doing the testing, you need to tell somebody about it and why you're doing it, okay? So I want to make sure my customers are aware of my commitment to DNA test. And then the third and final one is education. How much more confidence should my customers have in my product because of DNA testing? How much more confidence should my customers have in my product and what I'm delivering to them because of DNA testing? So here's a slide that I use a fair amount from Dr. Weber. And I think maybe Steve or somebody had a slide from him the other day. But Dr. Weber says, in the U.S., using EPDs alone versus using EPDs with genomic enhanced EPDs, right? So EPDs alone or genomic enhanced EPDs. Dr. Weber says you can make progress 56% faster by using genomic enhanced EPDs over regular EPDs. I kind of thought to myself, well, that's a little hard to get my head around. What does 56% faster mean? Does that mean, more cat? What does that mean? So I decided to do a little analogy. I said, SHARL versus Jim, okay? If SHARL and I are going to run a race, okay, who's going to win if I can run 56% faster than SHARL? Well, the likelihood is I'm going to outrun SHARL, right? And when we get to the finish line, I'm probably going to beat SHARL to the finish line, right? But the problem is we don't stop racing, do we? And the longer we run, the farther I'm going to get away from SHARL if I'm running 56% faster. And that's kind of like in the cattle business. If you're moving 56% faster than the other guy that's got cattle, then you're going to keep running and keep distancing yourself farther and farther away from him all the time. And even if SHARL decides to run at the same speed as me now, he'll never catch me as long as we keep running, will he? And so when I tell you about DNA technology, and I'll give you some examples here in a second, the guys that are early adopters, if they're moving the needle, the guys that aren't and are waiting on it are never going to catch them. Are never going to catch them. So here's two of our earliest adopters in the United States for genomic enhanced EPDs. And if we look at the line, that's kind of when they implemented, around about when they implemented whole herd genomic technology, right? Now, it took a couple years for those calves to get on the ground, and then those genomic enhanced calves to then mate and have calves, right? But you can see what happened when it happened, right? Look at how their genetic trends have changed. It's huge. So if the rest of the industry is still running at this parallel they're doing right now, and these guys have now changed, look at the genetic trend they're doing versus the rest of the guys that are just using EPDs. Fascinating. That was dollar beef. This is dollar weaning. You know, it's just a composite index of the various EPD traits, but you see the same progress. So really interesting stuff, I think. So from a marketing perspective, that was the selection part. What do we do on a marketing side in the U.S.? Well, when we have sale catalogs, we put information in there about genomic testing and why they're doing it, okay? Always we put it in the catalogs. How do the breeders demonstrate that? Well, typically they use a logo, you know, alongside that says they've I50K tested their bulls. That identifies the bull as being done. Some of them actually put the percent ranks in there so they can see where the DNA came from and how it changed the number. And finally, here's a sale coming up that they had two flush mates that were born just 3 or 4 months ago that they ran a DNA test on, and it changed those two full sisters EPDs, and they're giving you the logo. They're also giving you information as to why their EPDs are different. So it's really interesting. That's how most of the guys in our part of the country are marketing the DNA technology. So here's the other thing we do, and we really, really focus on, is education. We partner with our breeders, and we go out and we educate their customers as to why they're making this commitment to DNA technology, why they're delivering a product that is better than a product they were delivering beforehand, okay? And so this is an example of my team. They give over 100 educational events a year. And so that's a lot. And so we feel like that's a very, very key part of a successful genomic program. In other words, a successful one that you're actually getting paid back for what your investment is, right? And that's important because I know in the cattle business, I sure like to have a return on my investment. I don't want to just do things to do them. I want to be able to recoup receive some income from it. Okay? So I also want to tell you a little bit about where it's evolving, where genomics is evolving in the United States. So this is interesting. So genomics at the point of commerce. Are we getting paid for our genetics? All right? So the dilemma in the United States is up until this point, all feeder calves, no matter how good or how bad, were paid the same price. All right? So if you sold a calf at market and he was a 500-pound or a 600-pound steer in the United States, then no matter how good or how bad they were, basically the price didn't vary very much. Maybe it varied because they had vaccinations or they didn't have vaccinations or the shrink was different or whatever. But from a genetic perspective, it didn't change. So Decatur County Feed Yard did an analysis on 185,000 cows or 185,000 steers, and they standardized it, right? And they said, this is kind of the range in value of those cattle in the feedlot after they arrived and when they sold them at the end. they basically said the top 15% was worth $84 more than the average, and the bottom 15% was worth $84 less than the average. And that's all the cattle combined. They said this means that on an individual animal basis, that there were steers in there, 650-pound steers. Some of them were worth 90 cents a pound. Some of them were worth $1.80 if you had to buy them before they went to the feed yard. I said, what does that mean? I mean, you guys, we have pounds, and it's a little different than kilos here. But this is pretty easy to understand. Those calves are worth $585 difference in the top and the bottom of those cattle. Huge. Tom Brink worked at Five Rivers. He did an analysis. It was very similar, but much more simply put together. And he said he just took all the cattle that they fed in a year's time at that one feed yard, and he separated them between the ones that grew well and graded well and the ones that didn't grow as well and didn't grade as well. And he found very similar results in that there were $80 a head difference in just the two groups, not the ends of the two groups, but just the average of the two groups. So as a result of both these studies, there's two things that have popped up in the United States. We call them top dollar Angus and reputation feeder calf. Reputation feeder calf assigns a certificate that on a group of feeder calves in the United States, and basically how you get that certificate, the main part up in the right corner is the average value, additional value those calves are worth on a per hundredweight basis. And I'll show you what that means in a minute. And so it's 10 years. They want 10 years of historical bull data. Well, the problem is not everybody keeps 10 years of data around. So what we've done is now we run a genomic test on the heifer mates, and we can assign that value on the steers. So now you're actually getting paid for your test. So this is an example of different levels of assessments that they've had. One set of steers they said was worth $16 a hundredweight, and the other ones were worth $43 a hundredweight. And so what that means, if you subtract 43 from 16, which is $27, and you multiply that times 5, or 500-pound steers, each one of those steers in the high group is worth $137 more than each one of the steers in the low group. Well, for us, a load of cattle is 50,000 pounds, and we sell them by load lots. So if we extrapolate that out, then that's 100 calves. That's a lot. But the next question is bulls that'll sire calves that are worth $137 more? A lot of seed stock guys are in the room. If your bulls will sire calves that are worth $137 more per head, what's that bull worth? A lot more too. So top dollar Angus, very similar. They have 1 million orders. It's a little simpler. They have 1 million orders. They look at the $B EPD on the sire and the $B EPD on the cow herd. And if they're in the top 25%, those feedlots have agreed to give them $50 a head more for those calves. So it's simpler. It's sort of a grid system. So if you have information on your sire and dam, and the sires are in the top 15% for dollar beef, the dams are in the top 50%, you still qualify for the $50. If they're in the top 25% on both sides, you still qualify. But if you don't have that information, then you can use our commercial DNA tests to still get that premium, right? So again, it's pretty interesting stuff. So a $17 test for us will get you a $50 premium. So pretty interesting stuff. So I'll just kind of leave you with this. This is Brian McCullough at Woodhill Farms in the United States. Brian says, nothing in this world is perfect, including the tools we have to predict outcomes in this vast, magnificent world of biology. But EPDs or EBVs here are still and will remain the selection tools to use in choosing bulls you buy. They account for all sources of information on an individual, including pedigree, collateral relatives, performance, individual performance, and genomic testing. These are the best tools we have and most definitely have worked for us. So with that, I thank you and appreciate your time, and I'll be around for questions all day and all night tonight too. So thank you.